Hey, welcome everybody to Beyond the Road podcast, a trucking industry podcast, and we have a special episode here with our special guest, Paul Pfeiffer, CFO of ATS, and Jeff Potthoff, Vice President of Enterprise Sales for ATS. Could you two quick just introduce yourselves and give some background on your role here, what exactly you do at ATS?
Sure, I'll go first. Paul Pfeiffer, I'm the CFO for ATS, as Justin has mentioned. And I've been with ATS about 10 years, in the industry for quite a bit longer than that. So here to help support the mission of ATS and helping people succeed.
Jeff Potthoff, VP Enterprise Sales. Been at ATS for 21 years, and really my role here is to work across all divisions, knocking down barriers internally, and really making sure that the voice of the customer is being heard.
All right. Paul, you just recently did an update to some beginning of the year projections that came out just recently here. To sum it all up, I guess the question I have is we've heard the term freight recession for some time here. Why has it taken, in your opinion, so long on this cycle? Why has this down cycle been so much longer than previous ones?
Yeah, I guess if I really knew the answer, we wouldn't be sitting here with this podcast. But I think the uptick through the COVID period of time was elongated, and so on the backside, the downside of getting back to what is something that's more normal in the industry is also taking longer. It certainly doesn't help that the economy is not in a great shape or in a great position right now, so that certainly helps stretch it out as well. But it is one of the longest, if not the longest, since modern trucking was born in 1980 with deregulation. So it definitely has been dragging on a lot longer than anyone would like.
And have you seen, or do you feel it's hit? If you broke it up into flatbeds, vans, and heavy haul, has it hit any one of those groups harder? Has any of those groups been in it longer than the other two?
Yeah, good question. I think the van side definitely is hit harder and for a longer period of time. And the reason is that when you think about those three segments that you mentioned, that's the one where the truck capacity side of things is so fragmented across our industry. Just the number of trucking companies that are out there on the van side, it's there's some old statistics on how much capacity is held by companies that are under 50 trucks and less, and so when you get that much fragmentation, it's that supply-demand balance is just much harder to read, and that supply of trucks is so high when the volume goes down and things get out of whack, it takes a little longer for it to come back into alignment.
And there's been supply hanging around for longer than a lot of experts thought would be, correct?
True. And look, there's a number of different reasons that people have pointed to. Maybe the rates were so good or so high, at the peak of the market coming off of COVID in the 2021, 2022 time frame, that they had extra cash in order to be able to, to hang on a little bit longer. They might have also invested in, equipment that they had, payments that they had to make. And so probably for, several more reasons, it's capacity hung on longer than what most people expected and what we've seen in past cycles. What I would tell you now is that with as long as we've been in this cycle and the lower economic activity, I think we're at a point where truck supply is balanced now against freight demand.
And Jeff, how is this impacting some of the things you're involved with? Because you're looking to engage with larger customers,
sure,
for the most part, right?
Yep.
Multiple modes usually. Are you seeing less interest out there in engagement on the customer level in different segments, modes? Is there more of an appetite any one area than another? Is there any other challenges that have kind of risen to the surface outside of just the normal economic, or not the normal economic, but the economic kind of situation a lot of carriers and providers are in right now?
Yeah, I think, from a customer's aspect, specifically on the van side, it's been a tough road for a lot of the trucking companies out there on the van side, and it's really consumer driven a lot of times, and there's just been a tough market. I think there's pockets, and from some of our largest customers that we're dealing with, I've been through a lot of business reviews with them, and we're seeing downturns quite heavy, and their downturns aren't near as big as ours are. We were talking about recession at one of them, and they're like, we don't feel it. So they're in a different market space than what we are, and so I think each customer's a little bit different depending on what their true identity is as far as the products that they're offering. So,
you guys have both been through a lot of cycles, right? Ups and downs, freight industry, and it seems that the industry, we have a little bit of, an appetite for just self-inducing pain. The industry itself, where feels every time rates get good, market gets good, everybody rushes out adds equipment, right?
Yeah.
And then that only lasts so long, and then all of a sudden it's oversaturated. Do you think there's any scar tissue that's going to be broken away from this, that where any change in behaviors, where anybody's going to learn some lessons this time around? I don't know if we're that smart. The last, if you look at the COVID years for some of the customers, and now the aftermath for us has been bumpy, on either side of the table since 2020 now. For a lot of people in the industry, is anything going to change, or are we just going to keep doing this?
My guess would be that people won't change, but I do think that we'll look at things a little bit differently. I think I've been a part of some discussions, and maybe you just grow different segments of your business as an opportunity as well. So I don't know. It feels like when the economy's going well and prices are there, you want to grow and dominate the competition. But I think we might be a little more reserved moving forward. My guess. I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I think when I look at the two different halves of it, the customers that we support and help provide solutions for, I'm certain that they're changing, right? The supply chain disruptions, the where they get their goods from or the raw materials from, how they come in, how they're transported. I definitely think there's changes going on there, and we're going to have to adapt to those changes, being the solutions provider that we are. But when it comes to how we react and adjust, again, I go back to how fragmented our market is in terms of who actually physically owns the trucks that move the goods through the U.S. And because of the level of fragmentation, I think there will always be an element of this, the kind of this whipsaw approach of, hey, things are good, people get into it, and then rates come down and then people get out. I don't know that with this level of fragmentation that we'll get away from that kind of change on the carrier side.
Capitalism is still going to play into it, right?
Play into it, exactly.
Are we seeing any bright spots industry-wide, segments of the industry, modes, where there is more optimistic outlook for the next 18 months, 12 months, whatever it is?
Yeah, good question. I feel like anything green energy related, solar, wind, battery technology, things like that, it feels like that market's pretty strong. Ag and construction, I think, has been pretty flat, maybe a little bit down, but not crazy. So I think anything to do with the environment is going to be pretty solid. I do think that the consumer stuff is still a little soft. Some of the manufacturing indexes and things are still pretty flat. I know that they're showing some small gains over last year, but still not at that 50 mark, which is kind of increasing, right? So, I think that it's going to be a kind of a bouncing around the bottom still, and slowly starting to work our way out. I wish it would happen overnight, but I think we're in for I guess best guess, and Paul would know better than me for sure, but end of Q2, Q3 or something of next year, maybe we start feeling a little bit better about how things are.
Yeah, I would agree with Jeff's statements that there are a few bright spot areas. When I look at the characteristics of what those are, They're like the ones in the energy sector, right? They have a longer investment cycle. The projects take such a long time to permit and get going. I think some of those things were in the works, whereas items that are maybe more tied to the consumer, which, remember, the consumer drives 2/3 of the GDP in the U.S., those things that have a shorter cycle, with the economy slowing and softening, they're just going to continue to struggle because there's no, immediate economic demand or forecast for a lift. And I would agree with Jeff. It's not this year, and it's probably second half of next year.
Can't happen quick enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we got the presidential election in a couple months here, right? Obviously, you guys have probably heard a lot of the same things I have over the years about election years, bad for business, or watch out for election years, whatever it is. Is that fact or fiction? Is there truth to that?
Another good question, and this one is one I get every election cycle. People ask me this, and they ask it generally in two steps. One is related to our industry and the general economy, and the second is related to the stock market. And what I can tell you is that from an industry standpoint, what I typically have seen through cycles in election years is that there seems to be a little bit of a pause, that when you get inside of the election year, people start to maybe, well, like I said, pause on their plans. If they're going to invest in something or, build a new factory or add a new line, they might pause a little bit. Now, in reality, when the election comes, what I've generally seen is that it doesn't matter who gets into office. It's just there's some level of clarity, and so then they kind of restart their plans. Maybe they, make a few tweaks or adjustments, but the thing that hurts is the pause that they take, because it slows down the activity. Versus on the stock market side, that's another one that is, again, it doesn't matter who gets into office. What you see is just some level of okay, hey, now we know what the answer is and who's in, and we know if the government is divided between the House and the executive branch, and then they start to pick up back with their investment activities again. But in both cases, maybe there's a little bit of a pause, but it doesn't mean that it's things either go way down or go way up.
This guy wins.
Right.
Business in the sector for 4 years.
It seems to be just more about the clarity of,
right.
Oh, okay, hey, now we know the answer. Now we can resume with some of our activities.
Yeah, any thoughts on the infrastructure? I know the bill passed, and, when you think the bills are going to pass, and it's like, oh, wow, we're going to have all this business and things are going to be happening.
Yeah.
But
it's been a carrot out there for
I feel
time.
like nothing's really happening. Sure, we see road construction going on. I think there's a new bridge going up, or they're working on a bridge here in St. Cloud.
But it seems at the same kind of cadence that regular infrastructure improvements were being made before.
Right.
It doesn't seem like there's been any influx.
Yeah, I guess I'm not aware of any of our trucks running on infrastructure moves, and maybe they are.
Yeah, it's a baffling one, right? You're right. I mean, the bill was passed how many years ago, and we saw some of the money starting to be released and projects get going, but we're in such a divided time these days, and the government is divided at this point in terms of one party holding the House and one holding the Senate, and so those things then, for whatever reason, seem to get delayed, and the spending doesn't happen as quickly. If I just don't know the answer on that one, other than I agree. I haven't seen, kind of the uptick in the activity, maybe a little bit here and there.
Right, right.
How about maybe this isn't specific. This isn't meant to be specific to like a trucking company necessarily, but just overall cost relief. Our customers are dealing with higher supply chain costs. Providers are dealing with high supply chain costs. Is that just the new world now, just with how things are going? I mean, is there going to be any bounce back, or is it just it's going to just continue to incrementally have inflation applied to it? Like has the baseline been reset for a lot of these costs that we have seen significant increases over the years?
Yeah, if you're asking, is there going to be deflation?
Yes, basically.
Yeah, I think the answer is no. We've reset, to a new level, and while the U.S. economy in the first half of 2024 is starting to slow, and you hear reports of the, inflation target getting back closer to the, to what the Fed wants. Well, yeah, okay, great. Let's say it gets back closer to 2%. It's a little bit above that now, but that's 2% on top of last year's 4%, on top of the previous year's 8%. I mean, things are just more costly, and no, I don't see those things coming down. I mean, short of some kind of severe recession that pulls a ton of labor out of the market and devastates certain industries. I don't see the costs going backwards. So there's a higher bar now, and then the inflation that we'll see, even if it gets back closer to the Fed's 2% target, is just going to be on top of those already higher costs.
Yeah, so from a trucking perspective, I guess we got to worry about efficiencies on the trucks. We got to continue to keep our loaded percentages higher and keep the deadhead lower. Safety and turnover are always important. So I think from a trucking perspective, we got to be really conscious of those costs, because I think now as well with the customers, a lot of tools out there for the customers to, say, hey, that's a good rate, or that's not a good rate. So the days of throwing rates out there and just get it done are far and few between, I guess, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot more transparent industry now than 5-10 years ago. There's just a lot more data. It's with obviously anything else we're dealing with in our lives. There's just more data accessibility, and it's quicker
at their fingertips, right?
Yeah,
and that is true, and it's the fact that the carriers do need to focus on efficiencies and where they can take cost out, and that's what we do as an industry. Costs have gone up so much though that it has gotten to a point where the efficiencies that you'll gain through loaded ratio and things like that,
not enough to offset those
not enough
costs.
not enough to offset it, and rates are just at too low of a point right now. I mean, you think about the individual drivers that are out there right now, as well as the fleet carriers. They're all struggling because that cost increase has been so significant, and the rates have come backward so far that I think they've created a situation where it's just unsustainable.
Right, and I think the word on the street is that some of the larger carriers have drawn that line in the sand, basically,
I was
right?
Just
saying, hey,
about that. So what's your take on that, Paul? Like Jeff mentioned, there's been some reports out there. Some of the larger carriers have either refused to accept awards at the contract level or participate even maybe in the bidding process. Do you think there's anything that will play out? If they're a large enough provider, obviously it could make ripples. Do you see any changes? Have you heard of any changes either on the customer or provider side outside of that?
Yeah. So I'm not going to name any, company names, but if you want to look at the large truckload carriers in our industries that are publicly held, just go look at their 10-Qs and read their investor statements, listen to their, presentations that they give on a quarterly basis. And yes, you do hear a sentiment, a different sentiment. It's been happening for a couple of quarters that just look, costs have been going up so fast with inflation, and rates have come down so much that it's unsustainable. You've heard phrases like, we have no more rate to give, and while it's publicly stated by those companies, I think, the bid activity that the shippers still have, they're going to continue to push and try to get their best, deal and situation. Where it really will come to reality is when the carriers stop taking the freight. And I think we're at that point. I think we're at the point where contract rates have now bottomed out along with spot rates. Now, given the fact that there's no real economic activity going on right now, we could probably bounce along the bottom, as Jeff said earlier, for a little bit longer. But we are poised for those rates to start to go back up, because it's not sustainable for the individual drivers and for the fleets.
So how has the driver market reacted to that? Has there been a lot more movement between companies trying to find that greener grass? Has there been, obviously there doesn't appear, at least maybe it's just not represented well in the numbers, but it doesn't appear a ton have just left the industry completely. But there naturally probably is, but there hasn't been enough to kind of rebalance that scale of oversupply.
I think in our industry, and again, part of this is fragmentation, and part of it's, the capacity isn't owned all by public companies, so the reporting on it isn't great. We don't have a really good metric to look at how much capacity has come out.
You have farmers that will come out some winters when
right.
They need to, and they won't some winters when they don't need to.
So I look at like a number of different things. I'll look at DOT registrations. I'll look at the DOT revocations. I look at all of the small and mid-sized fleet bankruptcies, broker bankruptcies, which shouldn't ever happen in that business model, but they are. I also look at the public company competitors that are in truckload, and their active truck counts and their broker carrier database counts are all down double digits year over year. So I do think that capacity has been coming out of the market, especially the longer this has gone, and the freight demand hasn't come back. They are and have truly exited, and that's why I think we're at that inflection point where supply of trucks is roughly equal to the demand side now, and rates will start to tick back up soon, slowly.
Yeah, some like those carrier acceptances and stuff, or rejections have started to rise, and some of those other metrics. There's a lot of metrics out there, and I know you guys keep an eye on a lot of them. Is there a magic bullet one that kind of throws together an algorithm that makes you feel very confident in looking at one graph about what the...
Boy, I don't know.
Jeff, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Right.
Let's hear about your analytical data points.
Yeah, exactly. I look at the MDI Index, would be one that, I think we look at, and that's just really number of trucks posted versus number of loads posted. And again, we've seen this uptick, and then it just starts bouncing around, and a little uptick is bouncing around, so it doesn't feel like that's moving much over the last several months. It just feels like it's bouncing around the bottom again, and we're back at 2021, 2022 kind of levels with 22 and 23, I believe, with the MDI Index today. So other than that,
I was actually at a pretty sized customers. They did a carrier forum kind of deal not that long ago, and they had in their graphs representing year over year numbers, quantities, volumes, dollars, everything there, and the graphs on the PowerPoint were year over year, but the entire talking points were, I know we're showing you year over year here, but to compare it to 2019, our growth would be here. Compare 2019, our growth would be here. So everything, it was like the Men in Black amnesia spray. Just kind of forget about the COVID years, and let's look at it against a more stable kind of lens.
Right, and during that time, all the costs in the trucking
side
have gone up. So
right.
That's the biggest difference to me, is because even in our industry, even for our performance, we will look at like 2019 and before, because that's that last picture of kind of normalcy that we had in our markets. Yeah. And so, I expect shippers are doing that. Like I said, carriers are doing that. Yep. The biggest difference for carriers is we can't flip back to the 2019 cost structure.
Exactly.
So demand levels and revenue levels and things like that, and rates, we can look at that. But the costs, ATRI, which is the research arm of ATA, they put out a study just in the month of June here, and it looked at the cost of operating a truck on a per mile basis over the last several years. Between 2020 and now, that's increased almost 38%. And so that's the piece that we can't get away with when we do those comparisons from 2020 to the 2023. Almost a 30%
rates are maybe
38% increase.
Flat with where they were early 2020 at this point, mid 2020 roughly. Probably even below that actually.
Yeah, below 2020.
Yeah. No, that's I didn't see that number specifically. I know internally here, what some of those
right. You feel it. Right.
That impact has had on us, but just from a collective market side, I hadn't. So obviously, there's cycles, ups and downs. We've covered that to some degree. So a lot of the conventional or the expert, not conventional, but the expert feedback I'm hearing now is, like you guys said, sometime late Q2 or Q3 next year, start to see kind of a rebound. That's a ways out, but is there anything customers can do right now to kind of position themselves so they're not caught flat-footed when all of a sudden some of the capacity does disappear, people need higher rates? Is there anything they can proactively do now to put themselves in the best position for that?
I think it's working relationships, making sure they're communicating with the carriers, especially if you're a carrier of choice for them and you're one of their premier carriers. I would assume that they'd want to communicate and keep those lines of communication open because the market will turn, and we want to partner as a carrier. We want to partner with those types of customers. So it'll be interesting to me. One of the things that I've been thinking about is, as we move into next year in the next bid cycle, right? How many customers are going to push their bids out, or are they going to actually go through with the bids? They might push some bids out, just thinking that, hey, maybe we'll keep our prices where they're at. But like you'd mentioned, Paul, it's to a point where carriers just can't. We need to get rate increases, and I think a relationship goes a long ways when you start talking about rates.
Yeah, I agree, and I think a couple of the things that Jeff mentioned are things that I already see occurring. This bid season ended more abruptly than what the industry typically sees, and we have seen some parties pull back, delay, and or outright just cancel their bids. The other thing that we've seen, and this is again across the industry, it's not just us, but we've seen a behavior pattern of narrowing down to a smaller set of carriers and brokers that they're dealing with. So I think the shipping community feels that, hey, yeah, okay, we see it. Things are changing. Costs have increased. Rates have decreased. Maybe there's an inflection point, and so I think they're taking those kinds of actions to help prepare for the future.
Okay. Just a couple more questions here for you guys, and we'll let you back to the lab. What keeps you guys up at night? What worries you about trucking?
Oh, my God. That's a tough one. I guess the uncertainty in the economy is just one of the things that I think about. We had some meetings last week, and we really talked about cybersecurity and things like that. So I think those are things, too, that keep us all awake. Anything that would lock your systems up and keep you from being able to, do business as normal is a concern. So
yeah, that is getting scary.
It is.
Yeah, you hear more and more about obviously the CrowdStrike. Is that the name of the company?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seemed odd that something like that, internal bug,
tie up our entire
that kind of a global effect.
That's right. And so,
yeah. I think I would add to that. Look, in our industry, when you have big equipment moving down the road, safety is always a concern. It is something that, look, we have a goal of, we want every one of our drivers, as well as the rest of the motoring public, to get home safely. That's a successful day, if everybody arrives home safely, at the end of the day. And so safety is always there in our industry, and it has to be top of mind.
Yeah.
Good point.
Anything else you guys want to discuss before we end our time here today?
I think just keep grinding away. I guess if I had a message to people, keep grinding it out. Things will change at some point, and And it's very important, I guess, to keep the motivation positive, because it's pretty easy to get negative and to say, woe is me, and those kinds of things, and it doesn't do anyone any good. So I would say we're 2 years into it. We're still around. Yeah. Keep grinding, and things will turn.
Yeah, that message of Jeff didn't say it exactly this way, but look, control what you can control, and you draw yourself back to the basics. It has been a long downturn for our industry, but we do know that this industry is just ripe for going through cycles. It will swing back up. Rates will go back up. Drivers will be in better shape, and so in the meantime, we just got to again keep focused on the basics, control what we can control, and as always, just keep safe out on the roads.
Yeah, the big silver lining is we need trucking, no matter what.
Right.
Goods have to be
they've got to
delivered,
be moved,
and we're there to do it, and other providers are there to do it. So, well, that wraps up our special edition of Beyond the Road, a trucking industry podcast. If you would like more information, we will have links for some of the subject material in the comments and description. Thank you.